Coming to my personal story, I was born in Krakow, Poland in 1928. I had 2 brothers, 2 sisters, family of 5 children, and 2 wonderful young parents. You can see the pictures here. My father to the left, my mother with my little brother, my sister, Goldie, Tully, my little brother again, when he was a little younger. One of my brothers, I don't even have a picture of, so I can't show him to you. But Lola, to the left, and myself, we are the only 2 survivors. And here's Lola. This is a recent picture with myself on a ship. Lola happened to be a good artist, a wonderful artist. You'll see some of her paintings from memory after the war, what she did. They were not pleasant paintings, but she has a studio in Brooklyn, New York, and she paints beautiful, all type of pictures. So we lived in Krakow, and my mother comes from a other part of Europe, Czechoslovakia, which in 1938 became Hungary. So we used to travel a lot. My mother would pick up my family, her children, go to her parents for the summer after school. In the winter would come back to Krakow, where my father had the business. His business was, he had a wine and syrup factory, fruit syrup and wines. He also had a chocolate factory, something like Kit Kat, chocolate-covered wafers. Only in those days it was done in shapes of animals with tinfoil on top of it. So my mother would always take us kids to, when the war broke out, just before the war broke out in 1938, and the part of Czechoslovakia, which was Munkac, or Munkačevo at the time, they changed it to Munkac when it became Hungary. It was annexed to Hungary. And my mother's side of the family were now living all in Hungary, including my sister Goldie. And we all moved to Krakow. This is the buildings that we lived in Krakow. The 3rd window on the ground floor was my bedroom, actually. So it was in September of 1939 that suddenly I heard the whole building rumble like an earthquake. It was shaking. And I ran to that window, and when I looked out of the window, this is what I saw. I saw tanks rolling down the street. There was no fighting. If there was any fighting on the border of Germany and Poland, it didn't affect us. They just marched right in. And after the tanks, there were half-tracks. On top of the half-tracks, there were soldiers. And every few steps, one of the soldiers would jump out and get on the sidewalk. This is how they occupied the city. Following the half-tracks, they were the foot soldiers, the Wehrmacht, with their shiny black boots. Believe me, it was quite impressionable for a 11-year-old. I wasn't quite 11, 10 3/4 at the time when this happened. But no one really knew. No one had the slightest idea. If my parents had any idea what's about to happen, they wouldn't tell us kids. But it didn't take very long, we started to find out. Now, because my parents apparently knew already what happened Kristallnacht in Germany in November of 1938, and this is September of 1939, and a lot of Jewish people with Polish passports were all, they all had to, they were evicted, they all had to leave Germany and Austria. So they were coming into Krakow, and they probably knew. But to what extent, no one had any imagination. No one could figure out to what extent. They knew the Jewish people would probably be discriminated upon, maybe their businesses or places of work or so on. That's about it. but we didn't know to what extent. And it didn't take very long. In fact, 2 days after occupation, a truck pulls up to that gate. The center, there's a gate, and there's always a super who lives in these buildings, and they started to bang on this gate. And as soon as the super came running out, still tucking in his shirts, what's going on? He saw a bunch of SS men with a truck, and they were yelling to him, "Tell us where the Jewish people lived." That's all they wanted to know. And he was quick to oblige. He showed them that we lived on this side of the gate, to the left, going in to the left of the gate, but to the right of the gate, 2 windows are still visible. They also had 3 windows there, was another young family. So as soon as they heard where we lived, they actually broke down the doors, came in. That was 5 a.m. in the morning. We were still in bed, and they started to pistol whip everybody. In their hands, they held sacks, and they yelled at us, "Raus, schnell, schnell, the Jude." We called us all kind of names, Schwein, pigs, dogs, all kind of things. Throw in all your valuables. So they saw a lot of valuables like candelabras or anything that had value, silver or silver trays or silverware. And they threw it in those bags. And any money, any jewelry, art, whatever they can fit in there, they started to pull in. Gold, silver. My mother had a necklace, and I remember she had a ring, a wedding ring, of course, that was pulled off. The necklace was torn off. And my sister Lola, the one who survived, she also had a ring and a necklace, but they were torn up. And all of us are being beaten at the same time, pistol whipped. While this is going on, we hear a tremendous screaming in the apartment next door where this other Jewish family lived. They had a young mother and father, and there were 2 daughters who I remember after school we would play in the yard. And they recently had a young infant boy. And we heard that infant started to scream, and this monster was screaming, "Make them shut up," and so on. When Lola, my sister Lola, and I heard it, we snuck out to see what's going on. And what we have seen in front of our eyes, we'll never forget. It's always going to stay with us. We saw this monster holding the babies by its legs and swinging it, and yelling at the parents, "Make him be quiet." Only he didn't use such nice words. And of course, the parents were screaming, "My baby, my baby." And with a smirk on his face, I'll never forget that face. Like he took pleasure in what he was just about to do. He twists the baby head first into a doorpost, smashing its head into pieces, killing it. You should have seen that all of us, the mother, the father, all of us jumped on this monster. Of course, everyone was pistol whipped and beaten down. This was the first taste of Nazism. In fact, I believe that probably his buddies, these Nazis who saw this happening, were a little surprised themselves. Because right afterwards, they packed up. He says, "Come on, we're game, schnell." They're leaving. And they packed everything into these trucks, and they disappeared. That was our first taste.